In the dark underbelly of Berlin's past lurked a man whose deeds would send ripples of terror through history. Karl Großmann. A notorious figure, his name is etched into the annals of criminal history, synonymous with a chilling tale that still haunts the city's memory. His crimes, too horrific to recount just yet, painted a grisly picture of a man shrouded in mystery and dread. This story is not for the faint-hearted, but it's a tale that needs telling. Every monster was once a child, and Karl Großmann was no different. Born in the year of 1863 in the small town of Neuruppin, Germany, Karl Großmann entered a world that was already on the brink of change. The son of a poor couple, his early life was far from idyllic. His parents, struggling to make ends meet, could offer little in the way of comfort or affection. From an early age, Karl was introduced to the harsh realities of life. His upbringing was punctuated by instances of violence and neglect, with his father's heavy hand and mother's passive acceptance shaping his perception of the world around him. To escape the grimness of his reality, Karl often retreated into his own world, a place where he was the master and others were at his mercy. As he grew older, this world began to take on a darker tone. It was during these formative years that the first signs of his future atrocities began to take root. He was a difficult child, frequently clashing with his peers and teachers. His violent tendencies were not limited to his home life, and he quickly gained a reputation as a bully at school. Despite this, Karl was not without intelligence. He was cunning, with a knack for manipulation that he would later use to his advantage. His teachers noted his quick mind, but were equally disturbed by his lack of empathy and disregard for authority. In his teenage years, Karl's behavior only escalated. He was frequently in trouble with the law, facing charges for theft and assault. Yet it was not these petty crimes that would define him. Instead, it was the disturbing pleasure he seemed to derive from them, a hint at the monster he was slowly becoming. As he stepped into adulthood, Karl Großmann was already a troubled man, shaped by a childhood marred by violence and neglect. But it was in these early years that the seeds of his future were sown, the roots of his monstrous acts buried deep within him. But it was in the tumultuous years of his adulthood that Großmann would truly descend into infamy. As Großmann grew, so did his rap sheet. Our journey into the life of Karl Großmann takes a darker turn as we delve into his burgeoning criminal career. It all began with petty thefts and minor frauds, but these seemingly inconsequential acts of crime were merely the preamble to a story that would soon take a much more sinister turn. Großmann's life of crime began innocently enough. As a young man, he was known to dabble in petty theft, pilfering from local shops and market stalls. Despite his best efforts to remain undetected, he was often caught and reprimanded. His knack for getting into trouble was only matched by his ability to talk his way out of it. As he grew older, his criminal activities escalated. He became involved in fraud, conning unsuspecting victims out of their hard-earned money. His charisma and quick wit made him a formidable con artist, able to deceive and manipulate with ease. Yet even as he was building a reputation as a master manipulator, Großmann was also developing a darker, more disturbing side. His crimes began to take on a more violent tone. He was convicted of assault on more than one occasion, and there were whispers of more sinister activities that were never proven in court. Despite his growing list of criminal activities, Großmann managed to evade serious punishment for much of his life. His charm and cunning allowed him to slip through the cracks, always managing to stay just one step ahead of the law. But as we'll soon discover, this life of crime was only the beginning. The thefts, the frauds, the assaults, they were all just stepping stones on a path that would lead to unimaginable horror. For beneath the veneer of the charming con artist lurked a monster of a much different kind. Yet these crimes would soon pale in comparison to the atrocities that were to come. As we delve deeper into the life of Karl Großmann, we'll uncover a tale of darkness and depravity that still sends chills down the spine, more than a century later. In the aftermath of World War I, Berlin was a city on the edge, and Großmann pushed it over. The war's end in November of 1918 left Berlin in ruins. Its people were desperate, hungry, and vulnerable. It was in these dire times that Karl Grossmann, a man already steeped in a life of crime, saw an opportunity to escalate his heinous deeds. His apartment in Berlin became a house of horrors. Großmann would lure destitute women under the guise of offering them shelter and work. Upon their arrival, they would be subjected to unimaginable horrors. The women were tortured, killed, and their remains dismembered. Grossmann's monstrous appetites knew no bounds. His crimes became even more gruesome during the post-war period. As food shortages plagued the city, Grossmann found a sickening solution. He began selling meat from his apartment, unsuspecting customers buying what they believed to be pork. The true origin of this meat, the remains of his victims, would only be discovered much later. For 3 long years, Grossmann carried out his grisly business undeterred. But in August of 1921, his reign of terror was finally interrupted. A neighbor heard the screams of a woman from Grossmann's apartment and alerted the police. When they arrived, they found Grossmann in the act of killing a woman. Grossmann was immediately arrested, his apartment searched. What the police discovered was a scene out of a nightmare. Blood-soaked bedding, tools used for dismemberment, and the chilling sight of human remains. The full extent of Grossmann's horrific deeds was starting to come to light. As the news of his arrest spread, previous customers who had bought meat from him started realizing the horrifying truth. The city was consumed by shock and revulsion. The man they had known as a simple butcher was now revealed to be a monster, a cannibal. Investigations into Grossmann's past began to uncover the extent of his crimes. He was linked to numerous missing women, their last known location being Grossmann's apartment. The evidence was overwhelming, and the mystery of the missing women of Berlin was finally solved. The discovery of Grossmann's crimes sent shockwaves throughout the city, the country, and the world. It was a dark chapter in Berlin's history, a testament to the depths of human depravity. But for the victims and their families, the nightmare was only just beginning. Grossmann's reign of terror had finally come to an end, but the nightmare was far from over. Grossmann stood trial, but justice would take a twist. As the trial of Karl Grossmann commenced, the world watched in horror and fascination. The courtroom was a stage for a chilling tale of the depths a human being could sink to. Grossmann, the man of the hour, was eerily calm, almost indifferent to the gravity of the charges he was facing. Grossmann's defense was a curious one. He claimed insanity, a plea that, if accepted, would spare him the gallows. His attorneys painted a picture of a man tormented by his own mind, a victim of his mental illness. But the prosecution wouldn't have it. They presented evidence, testimonies, and expert opinions, all pointing towards a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The public reaction was one of sheer disgust and anger. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, demanding justice for Grossmann's victims. The media frenzy was relentless, with newspapers and radio stations around the world covering the trial in minute detail. The name Karl Grossmann became synonymous with evil, a persona that invoked fear and loathing. But as the trial unfolded, Grossmann was preparing for his final act. He understood that the odds were against him and decided to take matters into his own hands. In his prison cell, Grossmann committed suicide, leaving behind a twisted legacy and a world in shock. He was gone before the court could deliver its verdict, denying the world the closure it so desperately sought. The aftermath of Grossmann's trial was a time of reflection. Society grappled with the harsh realities that his crimes had exposed. The case of Karl Grossmann served as a chilling reminder of the monsters that could lurk in our midst, hidden under the disguise of an ordinary man. Grossmann's life was a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. Karl Grossmann's story is a grim chapter in Berlin's history. His heinous crimes, a dark stain on the city's past, have left an indelible mark on the annals of crime history. Grossmann's monstrous deeds served as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity influencing the way we perceive and study crime today. His legacy, though gruesome, has been instrumental in shaping our understanding of criminal psychology. And so we remember Karl Grossmann, not as a man, but as a monster that once walked among us.